This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
A preview of the local primary elections tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. We are joined tonight by the two heads of the local parties. We'll start with Brian Carson, Shelby County Democratic Party. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Bill Dries, senior reporter with the Memphis Daily News, and Justin Joy, Shelby County Republican Party. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you very much.
We're going to start a little differently, Bill. There are so many elections. We're talking about primaries, but they're big primaries. And why don't you give us a rundown, a kind of lay of the land of who's running, what's up, what offices are up for election, and then we'll get into questioning these guys.
All right. Election day, the most important fact here is May 6th. Early voting will start in April. These are primary elections, Democratic and Republican, for county offices. There are 83 candidates, 29 Republicans, 54 Democrats running for 24 offices. Countywide, that's 11 positions. Only one of those countywide races is one that does not have an incumbent, where you have new folks running and there's going to be a new person in that office. That is for criminal court clerk. 6 of the 10 incumbents are running unopposed in their primaries. On the county commission, all 13 county commission seats are up for election this year, and there's another twist to it. These are new districts. The county commission has gone to a set of 13 single-member districts. Of that 13, you're going to have a majority of new members. You're going to have 7 new members on the Shelby County Commission. Only one county commissioner, Terry Rowland, has no opposition of any kind and was effectively reelected at the filing deadline for the candidates.
And so let's talk a little bit about who's not up. No city mayor, no city council.
No. That's next year.
Next year, okay. Legislators, state legislators?
That comes in August,
Okay.
when you'll have the primaries for the Tennessee State Legislature, you'll have the congressional primaries, the U.S. Senate primary, the primary for governor.
Okay. And then what about countywide office, like assessor, trustee? Are those up this year?
Yes,
Those are all
they're
up
on the
this year?
ballot.
Okay. All right, so with that sort of lay of the land, we'll try to kind of dig into some of this. And let me just start with a real basic question. I introduced you first, Brian. I'll start with you, Justin. What are your, for the Republicans, what are your major goals? What are your major themes, if you can talk about that across a really diverse set of elected offices?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say thanks for having a program on our local primaries. Unfortunately, but frankly, this local primary every 4 years that is in a non-presidential year is typically one of the lowest turnout elections that we have in a cycle. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and talking about this election because it is important. And when you're looking past the primary for the local county Republican Party, what we're looking at in August is presenting the voters of this county with a slate of candidates that are serious leaders. We have some serious challenges in this county, and I don't think anybody's really going to say otherwise, but I believe the Republican candidates that will be presented in August will present various serious leaders to address those various serious challenges.
Look, again, for just the general themes, I mean, you have more folks running, but what are the Democratic themes that you are trying to get across in this wide range of offices?
Well, as Justin just said, with this not being a presidential year, the turnout is significantly low. We've been looking at the voting trends, the numbers we're actually looking at the past 18 election cycles, and we anticipate maybe 40,000 to participate in the primary election. And it's kind of sad with the population of Shelby County being 900 and something odd thousand.
Right.
So basically what we're doing, we're trying to engage in people in our Democratic community, get them out to the polls, let them know the significance of their voice being heard. Because if their voice, if they don't come to the polls and vote, their vote goes on deaf ears. And right now, the Republicans are the majority. They hold most of the county offices. And so we want to take some of the leadership back in Shelby County.
Okay. All right. Bill.
4 years ago, and Brian, you made reference to this, the Republicans took every countywide office that was on the ballot. And so here we are 4 years later with all of those offices plus Shelby County Assessor on the ballot after a change to get it on this same election cycle here.
The clerk.
And the clerks,
Yeah.
right. So what do you tell the candidates going, or what did you tell them going into the filing deadline in terms of what the candidates for the Democratic Party need to do going into this election to not have that happen again?
Unity. This is what I ran on when I ran for chair, and that's the message I send out to the party. We're stronger unified, and we're weaker as we're divided. So typically what we want to do, whoever comes out the primary, we want them to lend their support behind the Democratic nominee. In the past, people tend to get upset. If someone loses, they have their supporters frowning upon the Democratic nominee. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we're all Democrats, and we want to stand behind the Democratic nominee and go into the general election on one accord.
And Justin, what do you tell your candidates who are, for the most part, the incumbents in these county-wide offices going into this election 4 years later?
Well, I think being an incumbent, you do have the advantage of, and in the case of the Republican incumbents, talking about a very positive record that they have set forth over the past 4 years. But not only talking about the record, but also talking about their vision for their office for the next 4 years as well. So those that are running in contested primaries, I think that gives them a good opportunity to go ahead and begin to lay that vision out, whether it's an incumbent or a non-incumbent, for what their vision would be for their office if they get the party's nomination in May.
Brian, you had an executive committee meeting last night where, on Thursday night, if you're watching the show on Saturday or Sunday, you had an executive committee meeting, and it was again where this theme of party loyalty came in. How does your party deal with candidates or supporters or politicos who identify as Democrats but may have strayed from the party line or actually supported Republicans?
Typically in the past, I think it's been overlooked, but this year we're not going to tolerate that. We had 3 individuals who attended a Republican fundraiser, and we have our own candidate who's running opposing Jimmy Moore. That's who it was. And basically a few individuals were censured last night as a result of them attending that fundraiser. Basically, perception is everything. And our code of ethics, basically, if you violate our values, democratic principles, by supporting, endorsing, raising money for Republicans, you can be censored. And that happened last night.
Do you have the Republicans have the same objection to that? Do you censure your members if they're raising money or supporting other Democratic?
Well, there's 2 things at work, Eric, and it can be somewhat of a difficult line to walk. And on one side, to Chairman Carson's point, there certainly is a very important role that the 2-party system plays, and those lines have to be maintained. And when it comes to county executive committee members, there are certain rules there when it comes to not publicly crossing party lines and things like that. But that being said, Shelby County, whether you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, you not only need your base to vote for you, but you need a fairly substantial amount of crossover vote.
Yeah.
So while it's important that the party base stay unified, it's also important to appeal to a very broad base of Shelby County voters.
But let me switch back to you, Brian. When you talk about censuring people who've raised money or supported Republican candidates, I mean, there must be some people listening who say, well, what's wrong with that? Why? Part of what's dysfunctional, I think people would say, with the U.S. Congress and the congressional presidential relationship is that so much is party driven. Doesn't matter if it's Obama, we're against it. If it's Republican, we're against it. And that sort of labeling kind of visceral resistance or opposition to one another isn't helpful to solving problems, some would say, on the federal level. And aren't you pushing for that on the local level when you say that you cannot support a Republican no matter what, just because of that label, not because of what they stand for, what they do, or who they are?
Absolutely, but there are several different variables that take place in a situation like that. I totally agree that we have to work together to get anything accomplished, and that's
Right.
just it's based on human nature.
Right.
Now, the county parties both reserve the right to allow you to run as a Democrat or a Republican. That's not a right, that is a privilege. And when you are walking around as a proud Democrat, supposedly, you should wear that with honor, wear that with pride. Now, when it comes to supporting, endorsing, raising money for a Republican, and you're supposed to be a Democrat, that violates our code of ethics.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to work with a Democrat to get some things accomplished across Shelby County, that's fine.
Once elected.
Exactly.
Right, right. Because, I mean, once, it seems to me a lot of the time, I honestly lose track, and we cover a lot of local issues and have a lot of commissioners and city council and so on, but we're talking about county offices, and I lose track of Republican versus Democrat, and often it seems to break down of suburban versus urban. Now, more often than not, you know, it's Democrat in the urban districts and it's, Republican in the outer districts. But I mean, isn't that more important for the average person? Those are the fights, are suburban versus urban.
Yeah, basically it is. Most of the issues on a local level, it really doesn't come down to Democrat or Republican.
Right.
We all want the same thing from Memphis, a more progressive
Right.
Memphis. We want to edge crime. We want better health care. We want
Right.
better jobs, more employment for the peoples of this
Right.
community. And that's not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's a human rights issue. So basically it doesn't come down to Democrat or Republican.
Yeah, yeah.
And I would agree with that. I think especially at the local level, and as you work your way down from the federal, state, and onto the local level, I do think that party labels, when it comes to general election time, lose somewhat of their definition as they may have at the national or even state level. Again, though, there is a role that the two-party system plays, even in our local elections, but
Right.
going back to that broad base of reaching out and attracting that broad base of voter support is important for candidates in both parties.
All right, let's focus on a couple of different races for a second here. Let's talk about the county commission. Bill mentioned at the opening that we've got this change where it's single member district. People who don't know, a certain number of the positions, you can correct me, Bill, here, were super districts, right?
Super districts are multi-member districts where in one district you elected 3 commissioners in that one district.
So now it's, you divvy up the county and there's one
One
each.
member a
How does that change, we'll start with you, how does that change things for you? Does that create opportunities for Republicans that you want to take advantage of? Were you opposed to that? What was your take on this shift in the way that the seats are drawn?
Well, going back to when this new system was proposed, there was some discussion within Republican circles as to which plan or which system is adopted. But the plan that we have now, I think, does present some opportunities. If for no other reason, the geographic boundaries of the districts are smaller. And at least in theory, you don't have as many people to reach in order to be victorious on election day. So I do think it presents some opportunities that maybe not have been there in the multi-member district structure.
And were you, let me just start, were you in favor personally, or was the Democratic Party in favor of going to the single member districts, or did you guys have a position, and what do you think?
Absolutely.
How does that change the dynamic?
I think it gives us an advantage and an opportunity to serve the constituency in a better capacity with it not being as many people within the district. It gives the person who represents that district a better opportunity to reach out to those people in his constituency, help them better with their needs and whatever they may need in that district.
Okay, Bill.
We should also note that 5 of the commission seats, the elections will effectively be decided with the primaries because there's no one running in the companion primary and there's no independent candidates. So we know right off the bat that of the 13 seats, 2 of them will be Republican, 3 of those seats will be Democrats by virtue of one side having candidates in the primary and the other side not having candidates in it. With that in mind, how many votes are we talking about that will be in play in each of these districts? How many voters will likely decide the winners and the losers per district?
In the county commission?
Yes.
Typically, a few thousand turn out in those districts. Am I right, Justin? Maybe 2,000-3,000 people turn out.
See, it's amazing, really, because I get, and I'm sure you guys get, I know Bill gets, you're just dinner conversation or you're out with friends, whatever, people talk about, why does this happen or why doesn't that happen, or, complain about some local issue, taxes, schools, or whatever. And it really does, it's a, 1 million people in the greater area, however many people in Shelby County. and you've got 1,000 people affecting huge change. I mean, there's a huge amount of power if you look at the last 3 years, what happened with schools, what didn't happen with consolidation, whatever you think about them. Huge issues that affect the future of the county decided by single-digit percentage of the population.
Well, and what is really unfortunate, as Brian alluded to earlier, we have a county of almost 1 million people. And when you divide that by 13, you're looking at a little bit under 100,000 people per district. But a lot of these, especially these primary elections, when you've got especially more than 2 people running, the person who wins those primary elections may not have more than 2,000 or 3,000 votes across this entire large district.
Yeah. Let's go to another race, which is the district attorney. Amy Wyrick, I think, is running unopposed, Republican. The incumbent district attorney, Joe Brown, famously of the reality TV show, is running. Let's start with you. Your take on maybe Joe Brown's candidacy specifically, but also crime and the approach to crime and crime fighting. I think like you said before, everyone agrees we want to lower the crime rate. What does Joe Brown bring that Amy Wyrick isn't bringing right now?
Well, Joe Brown, he will bring a lot of things to the table. He's a polarizing figure. In the past, in his career as being a judge as well as a prosecutor, and may I mention he was the first African-American prosecutor here in the city of Memphis. His judgments and rulings were kind of unorthodox, and they kind of were controversial, and that's how he ended up getting the show. He's a guy of integrity. He says what he thinks, and I think he really would bring a lot of change to Shelby County. And his celebrity will bring a lot of excitement, and I think the people of the community will gravitate towards this election. I think Republicans and Democrats alike will get involved based on that.
Amy Wyrick, why does she deserve another term?
Well, with all due respect to Judge Brown, Amy Wyrick is not a celebrity, she's a prosecutor. And she's been a prosecutor all of her professional career. And there's obviously serious challenges in this county, like I mentioned earlier, but you want to talk about a leader who's ready to meet those challenges, Amy Wyrick is, and she's proven that in the last 3 years that she's been in office. And I think that she is one of those who, again, gets that broad base of support across, and frankly across party lines as well, Republican and Democrat, all across the county, and I think we'll see that again in August.
To what degree do you think the race for District Attorney General and a few others, the race to come in August for Juvenile Court Judge, to what degree do each of you think that this indicates that we're going to be talking a lot about how the criminal justice system works and whether it needs to change to some degree, or whether we need to keep doing the same things we've been doing? To what degree is criminal justice and our system here locally going to be an issue?
I think it's an issue, and I think we most definitely need change. If you look at our crime statistics here across Shelby County, it's kind of embarrassing. Now, that's not my area of expertise, but I know one thing for sure: if we continue to try the exact same thing we've been trying, we will get the same results, and that's called insanity. So we want to get the most person who's the best person, the candidate that's qualified for that seat, to get in and do some things different around Shelby County so our crime statistics can reduce.
Well, I think a lot of the problems that we have in this county are long-term. They have not been in place for 4 years or even 8 years for that matter. They've been in place for many years. And I think that progress has been made on a number of fronts, and I think will continue to be made if the current leaders stay in place and are allowed to continue to make the progress that they've been making.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Some of the other races, the candidates for clerk, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, always have a hard time with voters because the jobs are administrative jobs. So the first thing that a voter usually asks a candidate for clerk is, what does that office do? And the second question is usually, that's something we actually elect instead of it being appointed. So how important are the clerks' races, the criminal court clerk, circuit court clerk? How important are those positions to what happens in our system of justice? Justin, go you first.
They're very important, and like you said, I don't think they get the attention that they deserve. The so-called down ballot races, a lot of time, are a lot of times some people don't even vote in those races. They'll vote at the top of the ticket, so to speak, for the DA's race or the county mayor's race, the sheriff's race, and they'll just stop voting because they don't know who these candidates are. And I think that's a big mistake because they really oversee the administration of our court system in terms of making sure that the documents make their way through the system efficiently. There's a lot of expense that is involved in that, and it's important that those various offices are run in an efficient manner, which result in cost savings for the taxpayers.
Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with him as well. Those offices are very significant as far as record keeping, the filings of various documents of this city that are very important. So we need someone that's competent. And I think a lot of times, as he said, it's a significant amount of drop-off that we've been looking at when we were studying the voting trends. People do tend to vote at the top of the ticket and they drop off, or they skip over certain races when they don't actually know what that office does, what it entails, or if they don't recognize a name on the ballot. And that's something we need to change.
I want to come back to that, but while we're still talking about courts and so on, juvenile court. It is, I guess, officially a nonpartisan position, but I believe that the Republicans have said they're supporting, is it Dan Michael, and that the Democrats are supporting Tariq Sugarman. There was a lot of criticism a year ago. Was it the federal courts or federal government who came in and said mistreatment of juveniles, of African Americans being treated, kids being treated much more harshly than white kids. I mean, there was a lot of problems. I don't think anyone said there weren't a lot of problems. Let me start with you. What does Tariq Sugarman bring to that job that you would like to see change there?
Well, for one thing, he's an African American. He can directly relate to some of those guys, the children that are going through the process, and they may listen to him and take heed from him because he can relate to him and he's of African American descent. Also, he brings his expertise. He's been a judge, and he served in a capacity where he's been helping people for a while. And so I think he'll do a tremendous job in the seat.
Dan Michael, you're supporting him in a nonpartisan way, if that's how I should say that.
Well, yeah, I mean, those are nonpartisan races. It looks like he's going to get a lot of Republican support. I think I can say that at this point. You know, the filing deadline for those races is not until I guess the first week of next month. But I think he's already gathered a lot of Republican support. I think he's going to be one of those candidates that gather support broadly across the county. Judge Michael, he's been there in the juvenile court system for many years, and I think he's got the experience to address. Again, going back to this issue of the challenges that we face, he has the knowledge, he has the experience to address those challenges, take them on and do something about them.
Okay. Bill, just about 4 minutes left in the show.
Right. Let's talk about the race at the top of the ballot, which we haven't gotten to yet, and that's the race for mayor. Really busy on the Democratic side. We have a pack of 3 contenders: Deidre Malone, former county commission chairman; Steve Mulroy, a current county commissioner; and also Kenneth Whalum Jr., former Shelby County Schools Board member. You've had all 3 of those candidates at the Democratic Executive Committee, and they didn't really go after each other as much as they went after the incumbent, Mark Luttrell.
And that's one thing that I'm emphasizing and we're pushing forward. We want to have good, clean races. We don't want to have a bloodbath. All 3 of them are good, formidable, viable candidates. I think they'll serve well in their capacity. And I think the Shelby County needs different leadership at this time, Democratic leadership. So whoever comes out the primary, the Shelby County Democratic Party will stand behind them wholeheartedly and push forward to seeing them through the general election.
All right. Justin, Mayor Luttrell does face opposition in the Republican primary from Ernie Lunati, a perennial candidate who has run a number of times, not only for Shelby County mayor, but for Memphis mayor as well. So not discounting the Lunati candidacy, I'm going to say that Luttrell is likely to win that primary. And what is his challenge in seeking a second term as mayor?
Well, and Bill, going on your assumption on that, I think that Mayor Luttrell is known as a problem solver. And sometimes, frankly, he gets some criticism on the Republican side for maybe working across the aisle too much and solving those problems. And I think people all across Shelby County, Republicans and Democrats alike, recognize that. Again, going on your assumption about the May primary there, I think that he's going to continue to talk about his vision for Shelby County for the next 4 years, what he's done for Shelby County in the past 4 years, and again, I think he's going to have a very broad base of support in that effort.
To what degree is his role or his involvement in the reformation of public education in Memphis and Shelby County over the last 2 or 3 years, to what degree is that going to be an issue in the general election?
It will be.
Because your group of candidates were unanimous in saying that Luttrell has not done enough or as much as he could have, especially with influence in the legislature.
Absolutely. That'll be something to use against him in the platform, along with their vision. That'll be something they incorporated in their campaign. So, yeah.
And Justin?
Well, and as the head executive for our county, you know, regardless of whatever direct or indirect role that he had in restructuring our education system here in Shelby County, I think that he will get credit or, you know, perhaps to blame for whatever issues there are. I think it will be an issue, but I think he's also one, again, going to the problem solver idea that he realizes the obvious importance of education and the obvious importance of making it work in the system that continues to play itself out. I think it's finally starting to solidify some, but there's still some unanswered questions, and I think he's just one that wants to see education work for Shelby County.
All right. Justin Dwight, thank you for being here. Brian Carson, thank you for being here. Bill Dries, that's all the time we have. Join us again next week. Thanks. Good night.